Hello, this is SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoder. This will be part 4 in the series into looking at really not just to understand the Great Pyramid, but ancient architecture in general, which we can find in ancient texts such as Vitruvius's 10 books of architecture, who, well, Vitruvius and these Roman writers make no bones about it, that they learnt from the ancient Egyptians, especially at Heliopolis. But we have to firstly go again through this Vitruvian man, because this is by Da Vinci based on the ancient Roman architect engineer Vitruvius. This particular illustration, very famous, but it contains profound knowledge. In the previous episode I mentioned that the head, so from your chin to your crown, from the chin to the top of your head, is 1/8 the total height. I mistakenly used this image, which is your chin to the top of your hairline. So although 1/8 is the total height, where we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just disclosure, so 1/8 of the total height. This has to do with the concept of man as the temple. Man is a measure of all things, as said by Protagoras. As how Vitruvius points out, this is essential in temple design. Previous episodes I pointed out that the basic geometry in Vitruvian man also describes not just the Great Pyramid or Khafre's pyramid, but it also describes Menkare's pyramid, which you can find repeated in other pyramids. So it's measurable, it's tangible, it's testable. We don't need to rely on guesswork and adding measures and doing all of that hokey pokey jiggery higgery. So stick with the facts. So again, now man is a measure of all things. So from your wrist to the tip of your finger, or from your chin to your hairline, is 1/10 of the human body. The width of your breast or your cubit, so from your elbow to the tip of your finger, is 1/4 of the total height. Now your height is equal to from fingertip to fingertip. So your height is equal to your width in that sense. That's one of the important features, as we see there. So you're 4 cubits high, you're 4 cubits wide, fingertip to fingertip. There's another important measure here which is not spoken of in Vitruvius, and that is the span. So if you take your hands, stretch your fingers out, from the tip of your thumb to the tip of your smallest finger is 1 span. You can test this on your own body. Put your thumb on your bottom of your chin and extend your hand out, and you have 1 span is equal to 1 head, or 1 span is equal to half a cubit. So again, put your thumb at your elbow, stretch out your finger, and then from that same point to the tip of your finger so 2 span is 1 cubit. This is all based on the human body. Man is a temple of all, the temple of man. Man is a measure of all things. Now here we have an illustration of all of the imperial measurements, and it can be quite confusing, but also the importance of, for instance, at the Greenwich Observatory. This was repeated in many sites across the modern to the ancient world, to have something similar to this, where, for instance, at a marketplace, the merchant could come and he could measure what is the foot, what is the yard, what is the inch, what is the standard measure, the L, at that particular site. Now, this is important because imperial is more complex than metric. However, imperial contains amazing information. Imperial is linked to the metric system. Also historically, this is something that's lost. There's a lot of hate in regards to the imperial system. It's because, well, I was raised in metric. I learnt imperial later, and I realized, so I'm not trying to defend a position I had. I've come to a new position on imperial, and there is phenomenal information in here. Metric is convenient. Imperial contains extraordinary information, and that's information relevant to ancient societies and ancient architecture, and it's based on man is the measure of all things. So it's based on the human body. So from your chin to the top of your hairline, that's 1/8 of your height, or 1/8 of your width. Now that's known as the span. So we'll get to feet later, because feet there's so much in some cases active disinformation by some people, and also misunderstanding by others in regards to the relationship between feet, cubits, palms, etc. But 8 heads or 8 span from your thumb to your smallest finger, that is 1/8 of your height, and that is by the modern imperial. 8 span is equal to 4 cubits. So your height is 4 cubits, as defined by your body, is 4 cubits. So there we see 4 cubits. So span and cubits is, to begin with, are proportions based on the human body, unlike feet. Feet is not based on the foot. Now, for instance, to fathom the depths, a fathom was used by sailors to measure depth, also to measure speed. So knots, if you've heard, they measure the speed of ship in knots. They would tie knots in a rope every 8 fathom or 7 fathom depending, but it was still based on the fathom, and they would measure the depth of the water beneath them using fathoms, but even knots, so depending whether it was 8 fathom or 7 depending, but that's where this comes from. So used by seamen to measure the depth of water as well as the speed of waters, and the fathom is from, as they say, fingertip to fingertip. It is based on the human body. Now, even the word fathom and expressions, to fathom something is to understand it. So along with plumb, okay, as in a plumb line, that is still in our words that we use now, and our phrasing is to be accurate. But also a square deal or a square house. These are also measurement phrases that have worked their way into our language, and they have meaning, and as does fathom. So fathom is a measure, but to fathom something is to understand it. Now, half of a fathom, which is half the width from finger to finger or half the height of a human body, is also an important phrase, because yardstick is used as an expression of something to gauge the truth. So yardstick or fathom, to fathom something is to understand it. A yardstick is a gauge of truth, to understand the truth, essentially. This has worked its way from navigation and from architecture and measurement, has become important phrases that we still use today. So back to Vitruvius architecture, the symmetry of the body, the proportions of the body are so essential in the proportions of temples. And the Greeks and the Romans learnt from the Egyptians, and so it's measurable in the architecture. Unfortunately, the Egyptian and Babylonian writings are not as clear or as precise, but the Greco-Roman writings, especially Vitruvius, in regards to lifting technology, pumps and other things as well, even Heron of Alexandria in regards to lifting technology, steam and steam power and other things, basically still would be a modern scientific textbooks in the way they've described it. And to get a window onto the past, essentially, if you're not into reading Heron, or if you're not into reading Vitruvius, it's, well, half-assed. And it's a shame that so many of this general area of, I've got to say it, lost high technology, will either not address this issue, or they will diminish it. But that's a separate topic. But so the temple, the proportions of man is a measure of all things. This can be seen across the world, across time, across cultures, no less than as I'll show you in the pyramid. In regards to Vitruvian man, I'm going to link this video to Mark BEESON channel, who looks at the geometry in here. Now, this 6/5 ratio is also an important one, but the golden ratio, especially the square root of 5 and how that applies to phi, the golden ratio, the golden mean, the divine proportion, which is, of course, is, so if you're from your belly button to the top of your head is 1, from your belly button to the bottom of your feet is phi. It's built into humans. It's built throughout nature. Now, which brings us to the foot. So that's 1 foot. I've shown it there, which one foot is from the tip of a hairline. Now, of course, some people, their hairline will recede. This is all based on idealized proportions to the top of your breastbone there. So the foot. Now, the human body is not 6 feet by definition. So the idealized form using the modern, using English imperial measures is 6 foot or 4 cubits, but it is not 6 foot in reality. It's closer to 6.9 feet. The foot is based on the forearm. The foot is yeah, now, so 1 foot is equal to 1/4, so from your wrist to your elbow, that's where the foot emerges from. Now, it's often said that using feet, now you can use your feet from heel to toe to measure, but that does not even, you have to be extraordinarily tall to have a foot that is 1 foot long. Now, you can't measure walls by feet. We measure using our arms, our hands, and our fingers and our thumbs. That is the basis of measure systems. For instance, 12 inches, 1 thumb, even the word inch really comes from a thumb, or 1 foot is 16 fingers, therefore, and your palm is 4 fingers, so this is also a unit of measure of the palm, so 1 foot is 4 palm. Forget this tired old story about the king's foot. This is just old story. Now, an English foot, as we say, of 12 inches is equal to 16 fingers or 4 palm, which brings us to the Egyptian royal cubit, which is, as all cubits are, from your elbow to the tip of your finger, much closer corresponding, so from your wrist to your elbow is a foot, and the Egyptian royal cubit was 7 palms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Each palm is 4 fingers wide, so therefore an Egyptian cubit, as by definition as seen in cubit rods, is 7 palm or 28 fingers. But from your elbow to the tip to your wrist, so Egyptian royal cubit is pi over 6 meters, which is an important feature, and as we can see, that's 16 fingers. So just like the English foot, 16 fingers or 4 palm, so is the Egyptian royal cubit from the tip of your elbow to your wrist. 16 fingers or 4 palm, as it was then, as is now. So a foot is not 1.5 cubits. However, in the modern imperial system that we use, 1 cubit is 1.5 feet by definition. That's because a foot is actually based on the hands and on it is not based on feet. 1 foot is closer to 4/7 of a cubit. So this tired old myth of it being based on the king's foot is absolutely, it's just not right. So a foot is not based on a foot, it's based on the arm, the cubit, hands, thumbs, and fingers. It is, now I did a video a while back on king's heads, and I think that this is interesting because the importance of king heads in symbolic sense. Yeah, so just like 8 heads or 8 span from your tip of your thumb to the tip of your smallest finger when your fingers are stretched out, I think that that's got something to link in regards to it. But it brings us back to what could be called the ancient Old Kingdom Egyptian foot. So we have the Old Kingdom cubit. So 4/7 of pi over 6 meters is 0.299199 meters, 29.91 centimeters, and so that's the foot. Okay, but 1 foot of 1 English foot is slightly longer than that. It is 30.48 centimeters or 0.3048 meters. Very close. However, this is an important feature. We'll get back to that. There is a difference of 5.6 millimeters. That is extraordinarily important. This difference, as we'll see with others, contains extraordinary coincidence of measures. So either it was, and I'm going to show you that it is actually part of an important system, but these differences in measures actually contain some very important information, or alternatively, it's another bar in the great symphony of coincidence. And at some point, coincidence ends and a pattern begins because it's measurable. So just like Vitruvian Man is actually somewhere around 6.9 feet, very close to 6.8714 feet. And if the human body is 4 cubits high, 4 Egyptian royal cubits would make the idealized person 6.8714 feet. There is information contained in these errors, and it's just unfortunate. But anyway, man is a measure of all things, as Protagoras said. This is essential in the ancient architecture, the ancient engineering, and these systems of measurement in regards to temple design. the Greco-Romans laid it out for us very clearly. As was clearly written by Vitruvius, ancient engineers and architects, and has been studied through the ages, the concept of the proportions of man and the temple of man and how this corresponds. Schwaller de Lubitz did some important work in regards to fathom, so 6 modern feet as we call it, but really 4 cubits is 1 fathom, which is a height or the width of a human body. But he also made a note of the modern meter, as we call it, being embedded in older temples. Now, Claude Bragdon, theosophist, architect, illustrator, writer as well, wrote the foreword for Ouspensky, if I remember correctly. But both of these people who have studied this and have written on it and inspired and influenced later times, a common concept really about measuring, mathematics, and the constants which are built into these temples. And by constants I mean geometric and mathematical constants. Back in the ages, pi, phi, these relationships were true then, geometrically. They're true now, they're true on the earth, and they're true throughout the universe. And this is why the concept of the constant cannot be underestimated, cannot not be repeated enough, because it's one of the truths we can hold on to. It's unlike maybe other symbolism, but also in this age of information has become the age of misinformation and disinformation. There are truths that we can grab onto, and also eliminate the element of coincidence. It's also worth noting, so 4 cubits by the modern English scale, which is 2 yards or 6 feet, and of course the foot has nothing to do, the actual human foot has nothing to do with this measure. Now also worth noting, so we have thumbs or inches. 6 times 12 inches is 72. We have digits, mention them, but it's also again worth noting that grains or barleycorn, free barleycorn was a way of defining the inch. So 72 inches times 3 is 216. And each barleycorn was then divided by a smaller poppy seed, or a line as it's called. So 6 feet is also 864 line or poppy seed, or 216 inches. Now, these numbers are so important. Now, for instance, there are 24 hours in a day, or 86,400 seconds in a day. 1 degree of precession is 72 years. 1 of age of precession of the 12 ages is 2,160. The diameter of the moon is 2,160 miles. The diameter of the sun, 86,400 miles. So these also have geometric connections as well, but as an example, that these beautiful numbers contain some very important info. Now, a 1.5 foot is a cubit. In other words, 2 cubits is 3 feet. That's a 2 to 3 ratio. That's the perfect fifth in music. 1 foot is at a ratio, so 1 foot to the span is a ratio of 3 to 4. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 4 by 2 is 4. It's a 4 to 3 ratio. It's the perfect fourth in music. Now there's all and also the 2 to 1 scale. So in music theory, we also have these connections in weights and measure systems. But okay, 1 meter plus 1 Egyptian royal cubit plus 1 foot is ever so slightly away from 4 cubits or 6 feet. It's 5.9987 feet. Alan Green was the first to mention this, the relationship between meter, royal Egyptian cubit and foot. Now, for instance, 1 meter plus 1 Egyptian royal cubit would be 4.9987, so 5 feet. So there's a 6 to 5 ratio going on here, and we'll get to that in the future episodes. But what's also important is that this difference of 0.0013 feet, or 0.0396 millimeter difference, it's barely worth mentioning. However, this apparent error also contains interesting links to other apparent errors in other ancient measuring devices, such as the Salamis stone. And this is an important theme because I touched on it and mentioned in the last episode. Albrecht Dürer surely knew how to draw a perfect pentagon. Each corner should be 108 degrees, but the largest corners are 109.2. That's something so important in astronomical proportions: sun, earth and moon, distances and relative sizes between them. 108 is a good approximate, 109.2 is essentially perfect. Just like the 6 feet was actually 6.9 feet. So again, this is another apparent error. But if you check and you look deeper, what you find is, well, there's information here, because the foot is not 1/6 of the height. As a scale of measurement it is, but as a scale of proportion in the human body is not. There are 6.9 feet, or very, very close to it. Actually looks to be a little bit under 6.9 feet, because 6.8714 English feet is 2.0944 meters, or 4 Egyptian royal cubits. The height of the human body, 4 cubits. Therefore, an Egyptian royal cubit of pi over 6 meters would make the ideal human in that scale 6.8714 feet. They're incorporating information. Another element of the Egyptian royal cubit is divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 palms. Each palm is divided into 4 fingers. So the foot relationship really comes from the elbow to the wrist. That is 4/7 of an Egyptian royal cubit, which is 0.299199 meters. One English foot, which again is ancient system, is 0.3048 feet. That's a difference of 5.6 millimeters, a notable difference. However, once again, this error will actually link us to a very profound thing in regards to the meter, the second and the cubit. And we'll examine that further. So what's happening is that the apparent errors, mistakes, actually lead to learning. And if you double check, firstly your teachers, you double check yourself. You always need to look deeper, and if you acknowledge the mistakes, and if you acknowledge that those who are telling you certain facts might not necessarily be very accurate or diligent in themselves, sometimes intentionally incorporating a mistake to try and lead you to learning something more, sometimes incorporating disinformation to distract you from learning something more. And this is a big problem. So much disinformation in regards to certain elements of things. So mistakes and errors, and we'll examine this more, are built into these systems, or it's an extraordinary symphony of coincidence at such a high level of precision to really be beyond all but before the computer age essentially would be impossible to incorporate so many mistakes leading to such profound information. Okay, so sorry this series has gone on, and I've need to go through it because this is an important element of understanding, and the detail, and to be as detailed as you can, is essential, really, because otherwise you're going to use idealized measurements. You're going to start doing some less than diligent exploration, and that again is a big problem, especially in regards to clickbait ancient history. With that, I hope you enjoyed. There is quite a bit more to come on this, and we'll be then examining these alleged errors and mistakes and how they are built into, especially the pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid, and how concepts, the Hermetic concepts, Thoth, God of weights and measures, geometry, astronomy, and architecture, and how this all blends together, and how it has been transmitted through time, and especially, well, Vitruvian Man and Da Vinci, an important theme because he was at the very early part of when the Hermetica got reintroduced to Europe, and there was an explosion of knowledge, and the measurement systems that we use now were written into law. But it's tangible, the documentation is there, and that's why that It's very old knowledge, but there was at a point essentially when the printing press came along and it was written in a format which is clear and defined. Measure, measure, and the truth shall set you free. Have a good one.